My name is Darius, and at 26 years old, I learned that my value to my family was exactly $800 a month, while my brother's value was a $60,000 Mercedes. It happened at a celebratory dinner where my father raised a glass to my younger brother Trey, calling him the future of our legacy. He handed Trey the keys to a brand new luxury car while my mother wept tears of joy. Then my father turned to me, his face hardening like stone, and slid a crumpled brown envelope across the white tablecloth. It wasn't a gift. It was an eviction notice disguised as a rental agreement. "Pay up by Sunday or get out," he said in front of everyone. I asked why I had to pay to live in my own childhood home while my brother got a free car. My father looked me dead in the eye and said, "Because he is worth it, and you are just taking up space." I didn't scream. I didn't flip the table. I simply nodded. That night, I packed my life into 2 bags, canceled every secret bill I had been paying for them for years, and left a note on the fridge. Now my brother is panicking because his car is being repossessed. My mom is screaming because the electricity just got cut, and my dad is calling every number he can find. Before I tell you how I turned their world upside down with a single signature, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe if you have ever been the child who was never enough. Growing up in the affluent suburbs of Buckhead, Atlanta, meant that appearance was everything. My father Calvin wore his 3-piece suits like armor, and my mother Loretta treated the Sunday church service like a fashion runway. We were the model family on the outside, Black excellence personified. But inside the walls of our colonial-style brick house there was a caste system, and I was at the bottom. My younger brother Trey was the golden child. He had the smile, the charm, and the ability to talk his way out of anything. I was the quiet one, the one who preferred coding in a dark room to playing football, the one who fixed the Wi-Fi but never got invited to the gala. The night everything shattered started at Chop's Lobster Bar, one of the most expensive steakhouses in the city. We were there to celebrate Trey graduating from college, or at least that was the official story. I knew for a fact he was 12 credits short and had spent his last semester partying in Miami, but nobody asked me. I sat at the end of the table feeling like a ghost in my own family. The restaurant hummed with the sound of expensive silverware clinking against china and the low murmur of deals being made. The air smelled of truffle oil and aged beef. Across from me sat Becky Trey's fiancé. She was a petite blonde woman with a sharp nose and eyes that seemed to appraise everything by its price tag. She had made it clear from day one that she was marrying into the family for the perceived prestige, not for love. She leaned over to Trey, whispering loudly enough for me to hear. "Is he really wearing that hoodie here? It looks like he slept in it." I looked down at my dark gray hoodie. It was a high-end designer piece made of cashmere blend that cost $400, but to them it just looked like street clothes. It was comfortable. It was me. My father Calvin heard her. He shot me a look of pure disdain, his eyes narrowing behind his gold-rimmed glasses. "Darius, sit up straight. You are embarrassing us. Look at this place. Look at the people around us. You look like you came here to bust the tables, not eat at them." I straightened my spine, my hands gripping the edge of the table. "I came straight from work, Dad. I didn't have time to change." "Work, my mother," Loretta scoffed. She was adjusting her pearl necklace, making sure the diamond clasp was visible. "You call sitting in front of a computer screen clicking buttons work? Trey just finished a business degree. Real work. Strategic work. That is what this family is about, not whatever little games you play." I bit my tongue. They had no idea. They thought I was some low-level freelancer scraping by fixing laptops. They didn't know I was a senior cybersecurity consultant for Fortune 500 companies. They didn't know I had just closed a contract worth more than this entire restaurant. They didn't know because they never asked. The waiter arrived, a tall man with impeccable posture and a notepad ready. He went to Trey first, the guest of honor. Trey scanned the menu with a smug grin. "I will have the chilled seafood tower to start, the large one, and for the main give me the Japanese Wagyu ribeye, medium rare, add the lobster tail on top. Oh, and a bottle of your best Cabernet for the table." Becky squealed with delight, clapping her hands. Oh, babe, you have such good taste. I will have the same, but I want the truffle mac and cheese on the side. My father nodded approvingly. Excellent choice, son. You deserve the best tonight. He ordered a porterhouse steak for himself and the sea bass for my mother. Then the waiter turned to me. And for you, sir? I looked at the menu. I wanted the lamb chops. I could afford the lamb chops 1,000 times over. But before I could speak, my mother reached across the table and snatched the menu from my hands. Her fingernails painted a perfect crimson dug into the leather cover. He will have the roasted chicken, no appetizers, and water to drink. The waiter paused, his pen hovering. The chicken, Mom? Yes, my mother said, her voice sharp and final. Darius hasn't contributed anything to the household expenses this month. We are paying for his dinner, so he will eat what fits the budget. We are not made of money, and we certainly aren't going to waste the good cuts on someone who doesn't appreciate the value of $1. The humiliation burned my neck. It wasn't about the money. It was never about the money. It was about the power. The waiter looked at me, a flicker of pity in his eyes. I hate pity. I hated it more than their cruelty. I just nodded, looking down at my empty plate. The chicken is fine, thank you. Becky giggled, covering her mouth with her hand. Oh my God, Trey. Does he really not pay rent? That is so embarrassing. He is like 26, right? Imagine still mooching off your parents at that age. Trey laughed, wrapping his arm around her. Yeah, well, some of us launch, and some of us fail to launch. Darius is taking the scenic route to adulthood. The dinner progressed in a blur of clinking glasses and self-congratulatory toasts. I cut my dry chicken in silence while they feasted on lobster and wagyu. I watched Trey swirling his wine glass, talking about his plans to revolutionize the real estate market. He used buzzwords he barely understood, talking about synergy and leverage. My father hung on every word, nodding as if Trey were delivering a sermon from the Mount. I checked my phone under the table. A notification from my bank. The quarterly bonus from my consulting firm had just hit. $50,000. It was a sterile number on a screen, but it represented freedom. I slid the phone back into my pocket. Not yet. The tension at the table was palpable, not because of any argument, but because of the sheer weight of my exclusion. I was present physically, but I had been erased from the narrative of the family. They talked about vacations I wasn't invited to. They discussed renovations to the house that involved turning my current bedroom into a guest suite for Becky's parents when they visited. They talked right through me, as if I were a piece of furniture that had been placed inconveniently in the room. Finally, the plates were cleared, and the waiter brought out a dessert menu. My father waved it away. We don't need dessert. We have something better. He stood up, tapping his spoon against his wine glass. The sharp ring cut through the chatter of the restaurant. People at nearby tables turned to look, drawn by my father's commanding presence. He loved an audience. Family. He began, his voice booming with that preacher-like cadence he used when he wanted to feel important. Today is a momentous occasion. We are here to celebrate achievement. We are here to celebrate the future. Trey, son, stand up. Trey stood, buttoning his suit jacket, grinning like a Cheshire cat. Becky looked at him with adoration. Or maybe she was just looking at the expensive watch on his wrist. My father reached into his pocket and pulled out a small black velvet box. He held it up, letting the restaurant lighting catch the texture of the fabric. Son, your mother and I are so proud of you. You have graduated college. You have proven that you have the drive and the ambition to carry the Vance name forward. You are the first of your generation to truly step up. I felt a cold stone settle in my stomach. I had graduated college 4 years ago. I had a degree in computer science. I had graduated cum laude. But because I didn't walk at the ceremony, choosing instead to start my first contract job immediately, they acted like it never happened. My degree was invisible because it didn't come with a pageant. My father opened the box. Inside sat a sleek silver car key with the unmistakable three-pointed star logo. A Mercedes-Benz. Not just any Mercedes. From the shape of the fob, I knew it was the new C-Class, probably the AMG line, given my father's penchant for flashiness. $60,000 minimum. Here are the keys to your future son, my father said, handing them over. The car is parked out front with a big red bow. It is yours. You earned it. Trey let out a whoop of excitement that was too loud for the venue. No way. Dad, Mom, are you serious? He grabbed the keys, hugging my father, then my mother. My mother was weeping, dabbing at her eyes with a linen napkin. My baby boy, she sobbed. You deserve the world. Becky was jumping up and down, squealing. Oh my God, Trey, let me see, let me see. She grabbed the keys, taking a selfie with them instantly. Hashtag blessed, hashtag new car, hashtag hubby material. The whole restaurant seemed to be smiling at them. A perfect moment for a perfect family. And then the energy shifted. My father sat back down, his smile vanishing instantly as he turned his head toward me. The warmth was gone, replaced by a cold, hard stare. He reached into his inner jacket pocket again. But this time there was no velvet box. He pulled out a plain brown manila envelope. The kind you get bills in, the kind that signifies bureaucracy and bad news. He didn't hand it to me. He tossed it. It slid across the white tablecloth, spinning slightly before coming to a stop right in front of my plate of chicken bones. Open it, my father commanded. I knew what it was before I broke the seal. I could feel the hostility radiating off him. I opened the envelope and pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was a lease agreement. Generic, downloaded from the internet, but filled out in my father's sharp, angular handwriting. Tenant Darius Vance. Monthly rent $800. Utilities not included. Due date. First of the month. I stared at the paper. The numbers seemed to dance before my eyes. $800. I looked up at my father. What is this? It is time you grew up, Darius. My father said, his voice loud enough for the next table to hear. You are 26 years old. You have been living under my roof, eating my food, using my electricity for far too long without contributing a dime. Trey has launched. He is moving forward. You are stagnant. Stagnant. I paid the internet bill every month. I paid the streaming services. I fixed the plumbing when it broke because Dad was too cheap to call a professional. I bought the groceries every other week. But because I didn't hand them a check with the word rent on it, none of it counted. Mom chimed in, her voice dripping with that fake sweetness she used when she wanted to twist the knife. We are doing this for your own good, baby. You need a push. You are too comfortable. We can't enable your laziness anymore. It is not fair to Trey that he works so hard while you just sit in your room playing on that computer. Laziness. I worked 60-hour weeks. I managed security protocols for banks. I stopped hackers from stealing millions. But to them, if you weren't wearing a suit and shaking hands, you weren't working. I looked at Trey. He was dangling the Mercedes key on his finger, watching me with a smirk. He didn't look grateful. He looked victorious. He looked like he had won a competition I didn't even know we were playing. Why? The word escaped my lips before I could stop it. My voice was calm, but there was a tremor underneath it. Why do I have to pay $800 a month to live in the room I grew up in, while he gets a $60,000 car for graduating with a 2.0 GPA? The table went silent. Becky gasped. Trey stopped spinning the key. My father leaned forward, his face turning a shade darker. GPA doesn't matter, Darius. Character matters. Ambition matters. Trey has potential. He has a future. He is getting married. He is building a life. You are just taking up space. He pointed a finger at me. Because he is worth it. He is an investment. You are a liability. You drain us. You bring nothing to this table but your appetite and your sullen attitude. So you have a choice. You pay the $800 by Sunday, or you pack your bags and you get out. We are done carrying you. I looked at the lease agreement again. Then I looked at my mother. She refused to meet my eyes, busy picking lint off her napkin. I looked at Becky, who was whispering something to Trey, probably a joke about me being homeless. Something inside me clicked. It was the sound of a heavy door slamming shut and locking, the final tumbler falling into place. The grief I had felt for years, the longing for their approval, it just evaporated. It was replaced by a cold, clinical clarity. They didn't know me. They didn't know my worth. And they never would. I picked up the lease agreement. I didn't tear it up. I didn't crumble it. I folded it neatly along the creases and placed it back in the brown envelope. I put the envelope in the pocket of my hoodie. Okay, I said. My father blinked. Okay, I understand, I said. I pushed my chair back and stood up. The movement was smooth, controlled. I didn't look angry. I didn't look sad. I looked like a man who had just concluded a business transaction. Where are you going? My mother asked, sudden alarm in her voice. We haven't had coffee yet. I am going to the bathroom, I said. Enjoy the coffee. I walked away from the table. I could feel their eyes on my back. I could hear Becky giggling again. He is probably going to call a friend to borrow money, she whispered. I walked past the bathrooms and went straight to the host stand near the entrance. The manager was there, a serious-looking man in a black suit. I pulled my wallet out of my hoodie pocket. It was a beat-up leather wallet, but inside, tucked behind my driver's license, was a card I rarely used. It was made of anodized titanium, heavy, black, the American Express Centurion card, the black card. I handed it to the manager. The table in the corner. The Vance party. I want to pay the bill. The manager looked at the card, then at me in my hoodie, then back at the card. He ran it. It cleared instantly. $1,240. Add a 20% tip, I said. And do not tell them who paid it. Just tell them it is taken care of. Consider it my rent. The manager nodded, handing me the receipt. I didn't take it. I just turned and walked out the front door into the humid Atlanta night. The valet asked for my ticket. I didn't have one. I had taken an Uber. I pulled out my phone and summoned a black car. I wasn't going back to the table. I wasn't going to argue. I was going home to pack. They wanted me to be an adult. They wanted me to pay my way. Fine, I would pay. But they had no idea what the cost was actually going to be. They thought they were teaching me a lesson about money. But I was about to teach them a lesson about value, and the tuition was going to be very expensive. The house was silent when I returned. Not the peaceful silence of a home at rest, but the heavy, suffocating silence of a place that held too many secrets. I unlocked the front door with the key that I knew I would be leaving behind in a few hours. The familiar click of the lock usually meant safety, but tonight it sounded like a countdown. I walked through the foyer past the family photos that lined the hallway. There was Trey, winning the spelling bee in 3rd grade. There was Trey at prom. There was Trey holding his high school diploma. And there in the corner was a small, blurry photo of me from middle school looking awkward and out of place. It was the only evidence that I lived here. I went straight to my room at the back of the house. It was small, barely big enough for a twin bed and a desk, but it had been my sanctuary, my command center. I closed the door and locked it. For the first time in years, I didn't turn on the custom ambient lighting system I had coded myself. I left the room in darkness, illuminated only by the street lamp outside filtering through the blinds. I didn't need light to pack. I knew exactly where everything was. I pulled 2 large duffel bags from under the bed. These weren't travel bags for a vacation. These were go bags prepared years ago for a moment I hoped would never come, but always knew was inevitable. I opened my closet. It was filled with the uniform of my invisibility. Cheap t-shirts, faded jeans, generic sneakers. The clothes my mother approved of because they were sensible and didn't overshadow Trey. I grabbed them by the handful and threw them into a trash bag. I didn't want them. They belonged to the Darius they thought they knew, the broke freelancer who needed charity. I reached to the back of the closet behind a false panel I had installed when I was 18. I pressed the hidden latch, and it popped open. Inside was my real life. A stack of high-density server drives containing proprietary algorithms I had developed and licensed to defense contractors. A cold storage wallet with enough cryptocurrency to buy this entire neighborhood twice over. And a single tailored suit, Italian wool charcoal gray, that I had bought for myself the day I landed my first 6-figure contract. I carefully packed the drives and the wallet into a shock-proof case. These were my future, The rest was just noise. Then I started the dismantling. This was the part that would hurt them the most, though they wouldn't realize it until the morning. I walked around the room unplugging the mesh Wi-Fi nodes I had hidden behind bookshelves to give the whole house gigabit coverage. I unscrewed the smart bulbs from the lamps, replacing them with the dim yellow incandescent bulbs that had been there when I moved in. I disconnected the smart thermostat bridge that kept the house perfectly climate controlled. With each device I removed, the house seemed to groan. It was losing its brain. Without my invisible infrastructure, the internet would crawl, the lights would flicker, and the heating bill would triple. I was taking back my labor. I was repossessing my contribution. The room began to look unfamiliar. Stripped of my technology, it was just a small, sad box, with peeling paint and water stains on the ceiling. It looked like the room of a transient, a nobody, which is exactly what they wanted me to be. I packed my 3 monitors into their travel cases. The desk looked naked without them. I sat on the edge of the bed for a moment, looking around. This was where I had taught myself to code at 12 years old on a computer I built from spare parts. This was where I had hacked my first server at 15, not to steal but just to see if I could. This was where I had built an empire in silence while my brother played video games in the next room. I stood up and walked to the dresser. There was one photo frame sitting there face down. I picked it up. It was a picture of me and Trey when we were kids. I was 10, he was 7. We were at the beach building a sandcastle. I was doing the digging, the shaping, the reinforcing. Trey was standing on top of the castle, waving a flag, smiling for the camera. Even then, I was the foundation and he was the glory. I looked at that picture for a long time. I remembered that day. I remembered how proud I was of that castle. I remembered how 5 minutes after the photo was taken, Trey kicked it over because he was bored and my father laughed, saying boys will be boys. I remembered crying and my mother telling me to stop being so sensitive. I slid the photo out of the frame. The paper felt fragile in my hands. I didn't feel angry anymore. I just felt done. I ripped the photo in half, right down the middle, separating the boy who built from the boy who destroyed. I dropped the pieces into the trash bag with the old clothes. I checked my watch. 3 a.m. The witching hour. The perfect time for a ghost to disappear. I pulled out my phone and opened the Uber app. I didn't select the economy option I usually used when I was around them. I scrolled down to Uber Black, an SUV with tinted windows and a professional driver. It was a small luxury, but tonight it felt like a declaration of independence. I confirmed the ride, 5 minutes away. I zipped up the duffel bags. They were heavy, solid. They contained everything that mattered. I slung one over each shoulder and took a final look at the room. It was empty. It was dead. I turned off the single yellow lamp and walked out. The hallway was quiet. I could hear the faint sound of my father's snoring from the master bedroom. I walked past Trey's room. The door was ajar. I could see the glow of his gaming PC. He was probably asleep in his chair, exhausted from the exertion of receiving gifts. I didn't stop. I didn't look in. He wasn't my brother anymore. He was just a tenant in a house of cards that was about to collapse. I reached the front door. The keypad lock I had installed beeped softly as I disengaged it. I would leave it unlocked. Let them worry about security for once. I stepped out onto the porch. The Atlanta air was thick and humid, clinging to my skin. A black Cadillac Escalade was idling at the curb, its headlights cutting through the darkness. The driver stepped out and opened the trunk, his white gloves glowing in the night. I walked down the driveway, past the spot where my beat-up Honda used to sit, before I sold it last week in preparation for this. Past the spot where Trey's new Mercedes would be parked if he hadn't driven it to Becky's house to show off. I handed my bags to the driver. He nodded silently and loaded them. I got into the back seat. The leather was cool and smelled of expensive conditioner. I sank back, closing my eyes. "Where to, sir?" the driver asked. I gave him the address of the Four Seasons in Midtown. I had a penthouse suite booked for the next month while my new condo was being finalized. "Drive," I said, "and don't look back." As the car pulled away, I didn't turn my head to look at the house one last time. I didn't need to. I knew exactly what it looked like. It looked like the past. and I was driving into the future. The only thing I left behind was a silence that was about to get very, very loud. The interior of the Escalade was a sanctuary of cool leather and silence as we glided onto the highway toward Midtown Atlanta. The city lights smeared into streaks of gold and red against the window glass, a blurry reflection of the life I was leaving behind. I didn't look out. My attention was focused entirely on the laptop balanced on my knees. The screen glowed with a soft blue light illuminating my face in the darkness of the back seat. This wasn't just a computer. It was a scalpel, and I was about to perform surgery on my family's finances. For years, I had been the invisible infrastructure of the Vance household. I was the silent partner in their illusion of success. My father liked to brag about his credit score and his ability to provide, but the reality was a house of cards held together by my autopay settings. They thought the lights stayed on because of my father's pension. They thought the internet was fast because they paid for the premium package. They didn't know that I had been subsidizing their lifestyle since I was 22 simply to keep the peace. Simply to buy a seat at a table where I wasn't even welcome. I opened a spreadsheet I had named the Black Tax. It was a meticulous record of every bill, every subscription, and every hidden debt I had covered. Tonight, I was closing the ledger. First up was the internet. A TNT fiber, the gigabit business class connection I had installed so I could work from home without lag, and so Trey could stream his video games in 4K resolution. My father thought it cost $80 a month. It actually cost $300. I logged into the admin portal. The cursor hovered over the cancel service button. I didn't hesitate, I clicked. A warning box popped up asking if I was sure. I was never more sure of anything in my life. Service termination scheduled for immediate effect. The digital lifeline of the house was now severed. Trey was going to wake up to a dead connection and a lot of buffering. Next was the health insurance. My mother Loretta loved to talk about her platinum PPO plan. She saw the best specialists in Buckhead for her migraines and her phantom back pain. She bragged to her church friends about the low copays. She believed my father's old company still covered it as part of a retirement package. They didn't. That coverage ended 3 years ago. I had quietly stepped in and picked up the premium, nearly $1,200 a month, transferring the funds to an account my father managed so he could save face. I logged into the Blue Cross portal. I removed my funding source. I canceled the policy effective midnight. The next time she walked into that marble-floored waiting room, she was going to learn a very expensive lesson about the American healthcare system. Then there was the phone. The iPhone 15 Pro Max that Trey had been glued to all through dinner. The one he used to take selfies with his new car keys. He told everyone he bought it with his graduation money. In reality, he didn't have graduation money. I had co-signed the financing agreement because he had no credit history, and I had set up the monthly payments to draft from my secondary checking account. I logged into Verizon. I reported the device as no longer in my possession and removed my card from the autopay. I blocked the line from the account level. His status symbol was now just a paperweight. I went down the list methodically. Netflix, Hulu, Spotify Family Plan, the landscaping service that kept the lawn manicured so my father could look down on the neighbors, the pest control, the security system monitoring fee, click, click, click. With every confirmation screen, I felt a physical weight lifting off my chest. It wasn't spite, it was a correction. I was simply letting gravity take its course. They wanted me to pay $800 for a room. I was showing them that the room had actually cost me $3,000 a month for years. I closed the laptop as the driver pulled up to the Four Seasons. The doorman opened the door, and I stepped out into the crisp night air. I was lighter. I was poorer on paper. But for the first time in my life, I was free. Meanwhile, back in the suburbs, the sun began to creep over the horizon, lighting up the brick facade of the house I had just ghosted. Inside, the silence was absolute. The hum of the high-speed router fan was gone. The soft blue light of the security panel was dark. Loretta Vance woke up at 7 o'clock sharp. She stretched in her king-sized bed, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. Yesterday had been a triumph. Her baby boy Trey had his Mercedes. Her husband Calvin had finally put his foot down with Darius. The family was correcting itself. The hierarchy was restored. She put on her silk robe, the one she bought to match the master bedroom curtains, and walked down the hallway. She hummed a gospel tune, something about blessings raining down. She didn't notice that the thermostat on the wall was blank. She didn't notice the Wi-Fi indicator on her phone had disappeared, replaced by a weak LTE signal. She was too wrapped up in the fantasy of her perfect life. She walked into the kitchen. She wanted to make a celebratory breakfast. Bacon, eggs, grits, and biscuits. A feast for her successful son and her strong husband. She hummed louder as she reached for the refrigerator door. And there it was. A single yellow sticky note placed squarely at eye level on the stainless steel door. It was bright offensive yellow against the cold gray metal. It was the only thing out of place in her pristine kitchen. She frowned. She recognized the handwriting immediately. It was sharp, precise, and lacking in any warmth. It was Darius. She pulled the note off the fridge. She read it once, then she read it again, her lips moving silently. Rent of $800 was paid via the dinner bill last night. That concludes my financial obligations to this household. Below is a list of services I am no longer funding as of 3 a.m. this morning. Internet, cable, health insurance, landscaping, Trey's phone, security. Good luck with your pride. Loretta stared at the paper. She let out a short, sharp laugh, a scoff of pure disbelief. She crumpled the note in her fist, squeezing it into a tight yellow ball. He thinks he is funny, she muttered to the empty kitchen. He thinks he is someone. He thinks he pays for the internet. The boy is delusional. He probably pays $10 a month for some gaming channel and thinks he runs the house. She threw the crumpled note into the trash can with a decisive thud. She refused to let his petty tantrum ruin her morning. He would be back by Sunday. They always came back when they got hungry. He was just acting out because he was jealous of Trey. It was sad, really. She turned to the small television on the kitchen counter. It was her morning ritual. She liked to watch the local news while she cooked to see the weather and check the traffic, even though she rarely had anywhere to be. She picked up the remote and pressed the power button. The screen flickered to life. But instead of the familiar smiling faces of the morning news anchors, there was nothing. Just a bouncing gray box with white text. No signal. Check source. She frowned, tapping the remote against her palm. She pressed the channel up button. Nothing. She pressed the menu button. Nothing. She walked over to the cable box tucked behind the TV. The green light that usually indicated a connection was blinking an angry red. Service suspended. Contact provider. The words floated on the small LED display of the cable box. Loretta stared at them. A cold prickle of unease started at the base of her neck. Service suspended. That wasn't possible. Calvin paid the bills. Calvin always paid the bills. She reached for her phone to call the cable company to give them a piece of her mind. She tapped the screen to wake it up. A notification was sitting there from her pharmacy app. Prescription refill denied. Insurance coverage inactive. She blinked. That had to be a mistake. She had just refilled her blood pressure medication last week. She swiped the notification away. It was a glitch. Technology was always glitching. Then she heard a noise from upstairs. A shout. It was Trey. Mom. The internet is down. I can't load my profile. Mom. Loretta looked at the black screen of the TV. She looked at the blinking red light on the cable box. She looked at the trash can where the yellow ball of paper lay. Nonsense. She whispered. He is just a boy. He doesn't have this kind of power. But as she stood there in the silence of her kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator seemed to change pitch. It sounded less like a purr and more like a groan. The house felt different. It felt exposed. She walked over to the trash can and retrieved the crumpled note. She smoothed it out on the granite countertop, pressing the wrinkles flat with her manicured hand. She read the list again. Internet, cable, health insurance. She looked at the phone in her hand. The LTE bars were weak. She tried to load a web page. The loading bar crawled a quarter of the way across the screen and then stopped. Stuck. From the top of the stairs, she heard a door slam, then heavy footsteps thudding down the hallway. It was Calvin. "Loretta!" he bellowed. "Why is the security panel beeping? It says connection lost." Loretta looked up at the ceiling. The realization washed over her like ice water. It wasn't a tantrum, it wasn't a joke. The lights were still on, but the real power had just left the building, and he had taken the remote control with him. She looked at the stove. She didn't feel like making pancakes anymore. She felt a sudden need to check the bank account she shared with Calvin. The one she never looked at because she preferred not to know the details. The one Darius had been quietly refilling for years. She had a terrible feeling that when she looked at the balance, she was going to see exactly what her pride was worth. And she suspected it was going to be a lot less than $800. 3 days had passed since the silent exodus of Darius, and the house in Buckhead had descended into a state of primitive chaos. The air conditioning was off, the internet was dead, and the cable box was nothing more than a blinking red eye, mocking them from the entertainment center. But in the driveway, there was still a gleaming beacon of hope. The silver Mercedes-Benz C-Class. It sat there pristine and aggressive, a symbol that despite the flickering lights inside, the Vance family was still elite. Or at least that is what Trey told himself as he slid into the driver's seat on that scorching Wednesday afternoon. The interior of the car was the only place left where the illusion of perfection held together. The leather still smelled intoxicatingly new, a mix of factory chemicals and luxury. Trey pressed the start button and the engine purred to life. The digital dashboard lit up with crisp graphics. He blasted the air conditioning, letting the artificial chill wash over his sweat-dampened shirt. Inside the house, the temperature had climbed to 85 degrees, but in here, it was a cool 68. He connected his phone via Bluetooth, playing music from his downloaded library, since he couldn't stream anything without data. He felt like a king reclaiming his throne. Becky hopped into the passenger seat, slamming the door with a little too much force. She looked immaculate, as always, wearing a white sundress and oversized sunglasses that cost more than most people's weekly paycheck. But her expression was tight. The last 3 days had been hard on her, too. She didn't like sweating. She didn't like that she couldn't upload her stories from the house. She didn't like that the golden sheen of the Vance family was starting to look a little tarnished. "Where are we going?" she asked, adjusting the vents so they blew directly onto her face. "I need to get out of here, Trey. Your house is depressing. It feels like a sauna, and your mom is driving me crazy, complaining about her back." "We are going to Lenox Square," Trey said, shifting the car into drive. "We are going to shop. We are going to eat lunch at a place with working Wi-Fi. And we are going to forget about Darius and his little tantrum. Dad says he will be back by the weekend anyway, begging for forgiveness." Becky softened slightly, looking at the diamond on her finger. "I hope so. He is being so dramatic. It is just rent. Everyone pays rent." Trey pulled out of the driveway, revving the engine unnecessarily loudly. He wanted the neighbors to look. He wanted them to see that the Vances were still rolling in style. He navigated the winding streets of the subdivision, driving with one hand on the wheel, the other resting casually on the center console. He felt powerful. The car responded to his touch, instantly masking the insecurity that had been gnawing at him since the internet went dark. They merged onto Peachtree Road. Traffic was heavy as usual, but Trey drove aggressively, weaving between lanes, cutting off a Honda Civic with a dismissive wave. He was in a Mercedes. The rules were different for him. He was the golden child. The road belonged to him. He saw the blue lights flash in his rearview mirror before he heard the siren. A Georgia State Patrol Charger was right on his bumper. Becky gasped, clutching her designer purse. "Oh my God, Trey, you are getting pulled over." "Relax, babe," Trey said, rolling his eyes. He glanced at the speedometer. He wasn't even speeding that much. Probably just wants to check out the car. It happens all the time with rides like this. Jealousy is a disease. He pulled over into the parking lot of a strip mall right in front of a busy smoothie shop. People sitting on the patio turned to watch. Trey adjusted his mirror, checking his hair. He wasn't worried. His dad knew people. A ticket was just a piece of paper. He lowered the window as the trooper approached. The heat of the afternoon rushed in instantly, ruining the climate-controlled bubble. Afternoon Officer Trey said, flashing his winning smile, the one that usually got him out of homework and detention. What seems to be the problem? License and registration, the trooper said. He was a large man with mirrored sunglasses that reflected Trey's confident grin back at him. He didn't smile back. Trey reached into the glove compartment. He pulled out the leather folder the dealership had given them. He handed over his license and the temporary registration paper. The trooper took them and walked back to his cruiser. See, Trey said to Becky. No big deal, just a routine check. He probably saw the temporary tag and wanted to make sure it was legit. Becky looked out the window at the people watching them. Just get it over with, Trey. This is embarrassing. People are staring. Let them stare, Trey said, drumming his fingers on the steering wheel. They are staring because we look good. 10 minutes passed. The air conditioning was fighting a losing battle against the open window. Trey started to get annoyed. What is taking him so long, he muttered. Finally, the trooper returned. He wasn't holding a ticket book. He was holding a clipboard. And he wasn't alone. Another patrol car had pulled up behind him, blocking the Mercedes Inn. Step out of the vehicle, sir, the trooper said. Trey blinked. Excuse me. Step out of the vehicle, now. Trey opened the door and stepped out, his legs feeling suddenly unsteady. What is this about? I wasn't speeding. The trooper looked at him impassively. Sir, this vehicle is being impounded. You are operating a motor vehicle on a public roadway without active liability insurance. That is a violation of Georgia state law. Trey laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound. That is impossible. This is a brand new car. My dad just bought it 3 days ago. The insurance is full coverage. It is bundled with the house. The trooper looked down at his clipboard. According to the database, the policy on this vehicle was canceled effective 3 days ago. The primary policyholder listed as Darius Vance terminated the coverage. There is currently 0 coverage on this vehicle. Trey felt the blood drain from his face. Darius. He heard the name and his brain stumbled. Darius. Why would Darius be on the insurance? Then the memory hit him. A flash from the dealership 3 days ago. His father Calvin sitting across from the finance manager, sweating slightly as he looked at the monthly payments. The manager saying something about credit scores and high-risk drivers. His father making a call. Darius showing up in his hoodie, signing a stack of papers without reading them, handing over a card. His father had told him Darius was just handling the paperwork because he was good with details. He hadn't told him that Darius was the co-signer. That Darius was the one guaranteeing the loan. That Darius was the one paying the $300 a month premium because Trey had 3 speeding tickets on his record. Becky leaned out the window. Trey, what is going on? Why are they talking about impounding the car? Trey looked at her, then back at the trooper. Look, officer, there must be a mistake. My brother. He is confused. He handles the bills, but my dad pays for it. I can call my dad right now. He will clear this up. You can make your calls from the sidewalk, sir, the trooper said, closing the folder. The tow truck is already on its way. You and your passenger need to exit the vehicle and remove any personal belongings. This car is not moving another inch under its own power. No, you don't understand. Trey pleaded, his voice rising an octave. This is a Mercedes. You can't just tow it. It is $60,000. I don't care if it is a spaceship, son. No insurance means no driving. Step away from the car. Becky got out of the car. She looked furious. She slammed the door so hard the car shook. Trey, you said everything was taken care of. You said you own this car. Why is the police officer saying Darius canceled the insurance? Because Darius is a snake, Trey shouted, losing his composure completely. He is trying to sabotage me. He is jealous. A massive flatbed tow truck rumbled into the parking lot, its yellow lights flashing, painting the scene in a humiliating strobe effect. The driver, a man in a greasy jumpsuit, hopped out and started unspooling the chains. He didn't treat the Mercedes with reverence. He treated it like a hunk of metal that needed to be moved. Trey watched in horror as the driver hooked the chains to the undercarriage. He heard the screech of metal on metal. They were dragging his future onto the bed of a truck. "Wait, stop! You are going to scratch the bumper!" Trey yelled, running forward. The trooper stepped in his path, his hand resting on his belt. "Back off, sir. Do not interfere." Trey stopped, his chest heaving. He pulled out his phone. He dialed his father. Straight to voicemail. He dialed his mother. Straight to voicemail. The phones were down. The service was cut. He had forgotten. He was standing in a parking lot with a brick in his hand. Becky was standing on the curb, her arms crossed, her face red from the heat and the rage. "You are a liar, Trey. You told me you were independent. You told me you were a partner in the family business. Your brother pays for your car insurance. You are a child. No, babe, listen, it is not like that." Trey stammered, reaching for her. "Don't touch me," she snapped. "Look at us. We are stranded in a parking lot. My makeup is melting, and your car is being taken away because you can't pay your bills. How are we supposed to get home? We can Uber." Trey said, his voice small. "With what app?" Becky screamed. "Your phone doesn't have data, Trey. Remember." Darius cut that too. The realization hit Trey like a physical blow. He was stranded. He had no car. He had no phone service. He had no money in his pocket because he always used Apple Pay, which required data. He was completely helpless. The tow truck engine roared as the winch pulled the Mercedes up the ramp. The silver paint gleamed in the harsh Georgia sun, a beautiful object that Trey had held for exactly 72 hours. As the truck pulled away, merging into traffic, taking his status symbol to the impound lot, Trey felt a sensation he hadn't experienced in years. He felt small. He looked around the parking lot. The people on the patio were filming. He could see their phones held up recording his downfall. He knew this would be on TikTok within the hour. The golden child having a meltdown. The prince stripped of his chariot. Becky started walking away, her heels clicking angrily on the pavement. "Where are you going?" Trey called out. "I am going inside to use their Wi-Fi to call a real man to pick me up," she yelled back without turning around. "Don't follow me." Trey stood alone on the hot asphalt. The sweat was pouring down his back now, soaking his expensive shirt. He looked at his reflection in the glass window of the smoothie shop. He didn't look like a future business mogul. He looked like a frightened boy who had just realized that the magic carpet he had been riding on was actually just a rug being pulled out from under his feet, and the person pulling it wasn't even in the state anymore. Darius was gone, but his grip was tightening around Trey's throat with every passing second. This wasn't just a prank. This was a siege. And for the first time in his life, Trey realized he didn't have any ammunition. The house in Buckhead sat like a tomb in the suffocating Georgia heat. Night had fallen, but it brought no relief from the temperature that had been steadily climbing inside the brick walls for 3 days. Inside the dining room, 2 solitary beeswax candles flickered on the mahogany table, casting long dancing shadows against the expensive wallpaper. It looked like a scene from a romantic anniversary dinner, but the smell in the air wasn't roses or fine wine. It was the scent of desperation and spoiling milk. Calvin Vance sat at the head of the table in his undershirt, holding a fork with a shaking hand. He was sweating. Beads of perspiration rolled down his forehead and dripped onto the collar of his shirt. Across from him, Loretta fanned herself aggressively with a piece of junk mail, her face flushed and shiny. They were eating the contents of the freezer before it all went bad. Thawed shrimp cocktail that was slightly warm and gourmet ice cream that had turned into soup. "It is barbaric," Loretta hissed, slamming her hand down on the table. The candle flame jumped. "We are living like animals, Calvin. No lights, no air. I can't even charge my iPad. How long is this going to last?" Calvin chewed a rubbery shrimp and swallowed it with difficulty. "I called the power company, Loretta. I told you, there is a hold on the account. A past due balance. They said they can't restore service until the arrears are paid in full, plus a reconnection fee. How much Loretta demanded? How much could it possibly be? Calvin looked at the envelope sitting next to his plate. He had fished it out of the mailbox earlier that afternoon, hoping it was a check or a letter from Darius apologizing. Instead, it was a final notice from Georgia Power. He picked it up, his fingers leaving a damp smudge on the paper. $450 a month, he whispered. The total due is over $2,000. Darius hasn't paid it in months. He let it pile up and then he canceled the autopay. Loretta stopped fanning herself. $450 for electricity. That is impossible. We barely use anything. We use everything. Calvin snapped, his patience fraying in the heat. The central air, the pool pump, the security lights, the 3 refrigerators. We have been burning power like it was free because we thought it was free. He threw the bill back onto the table. It slid into a puddle of melted vanilla ice cream. He wants to break us, Calvin. He wants us to come crawling back. Well, I won't do it. I will sit in the dark until doomsday before I call that ungrateful boy and beg. Suddenly, Loretta dropped her makeshift fan. She gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles turning white. A low groan escaped her lips. Calvin looked up. Loretta, what is it? My stomach, she gasped. It feels like a knife. It is burning, Calvin. She doubled over, her face contorting in agony. The stress of the last 72 hours combined with the questionable seafood had created a perfect storm in her digestive system. But for Loretta, pain wasn't just physical, it was a performance, and tonight she had a captive audience of one. I need a doctor, she wheezed. Take me to Northside, now. Calvin scrambled up, knocking his chair over in the darkness. He rushed to her side, helping her stand. She was heavy on his arm, her breathing shallow and panicked. Okay, hold on. I have got you. We are going. They stumbled through the dark house, guided only by the moonlight filtering through the windows. They passed the silent refrigerator and the dead thermostat. They made it to the garage where Calvin's older Lexus sat gathering dust. Trey's Mercedes was gone, impounded by the state. This was their only option. The drive to the hospital was a blur of tension. Calvin drove with one hand on the wheel and the other gripping the center console, his eyes darting between the road and his wife, who was moaning softly in the passenger seat. Do not worry, baby, he said, trying to convince himself as much as her. We are going to the VIP wing. Dr. Evans will take care of you. We have the Platinum plan. Best coverage in the state. They pulled up to the circular drive of the private hospital entrance. It was brightly lit, clean and quiet. A valet opened the door and helped Loretta into a wheelchair. Calvin tossed him the keys, feeling a flicker of his old authority return. This was their world. Sterile, efficient, and expensive. He marched up to the reception desk, his chest puffed out. My wife needs to be seen immediately. She is in severe pain. We are patients of Dr. Evans. Loretta Vance, the receptionist. A young woman with a polite smile typed Loretta's name into the computer. She frowned. She typed it again. I see her file, Mr. Vance. However, the system is showing a flag on her insurance. Calvin waved his hand dismissively. That is a mistake. It is a Platinum PPO, Blue Cross. Check again. The receptionist turned the screen slightly. Sir, it says here the policy was terminated by the primary account holder 3 days ago. Status inactive. Calvin froze. The primary account holder. Darius. Well, run it again, he demanded, his voice rising. Or bill us later. We have been coming here for 20 years. I am sorry, sir, the receptionist said, her smile fading into a professional mask. Policy dictates that without active insurance, we require a deposit before admission for non-life-threatening conditions. A deposit? Calvin scoffed. Fine. How much? $2,000. Calvin blinked. $2,000. To cover the initial exam labs and imaging. If she is admitted, it will be more. Loretta let out a sharp cry from the wheelchair, clutching her abdomen. Calvin, just pay them. It hurts. Calvin reached for his wallet. He pulled out his gold MasterCard, the one he used for golf trips and dinners, the one he thought had a $20,000 limit. He handed it to the woman with a tremble in his fingers. "Here, just run it." She took the card and swiped it. The machine thought for a second, then it let out a loud, harsh beep. Declined. Calvin felt the blood drain from his face. "Try it again. It must be the chip." She swiped it again. Beep. Declined. Contact issuer. "Sir, do you have another form of payment?" Calvin patted his pockets. He had a debit card, but he knew exactly what was in that checking account. Less than $300. The mortgage payment had just auto-paid yesterday, draining the last of his liquidity. Darius usually transferred the grocery money by now. But Darius was gone. He looked at Loretta. She was looking at him with wide, terrified eyes. She saw the shame on his face. She saw the truth. "I can't," Calvin whispered. The receptionist looked down at her desk, embarrassed for them. "Sir, there is a county hospital about 20 minutes south. Grady Memorial. They have an emergency room that accepts patients regardless of ability to pay." Grady. Loretta gasped. Her voice was weak but filled with horror. "You can't be serious. That is a public hospital. It is for them. It is your only option, ma'am, unless you have the cash," the receptionist said gently but firmly, pushing the declined card back across the counter. The walk back to the car was the longest journey of Calvin's life. He had to ask the valet for his keys back without tipping him because he didn't have any cash. He had to help his weeping wife back into the passenger seat of his aging Lexus under the bright, unforgiving lights of the hospital canopy. The drive to the public hospital was a descent into a different reality. The streets got darker, the potholes deeper. They pulled into the emergency lot, which was packed with cars that had taped up windows and mismatched bumpers. Inside the waiting room was a chaotic sea of humanity. It smelled of antiseptic and unwashed bodies. A baby was screaming in the corner. A man was holding a bloody towel to his head. The television was blaring a courtroom reality show. Calvin helped Loretta to the triage window. There was no valet here, no polite smile, just a tired nurse behind bulletproof glass who handed him a clipboard and told him to take a number. They found 2 plastic chairs in the back near the vending machines. The chairs were hard and bolted to the floor. Loretta curled into herself, pulling her silk robe tight around her body, trying to shrink away from the world. She looked out of place like a diamond dropped in the mud. Calvin sat next to her, staring at the scuffed linoleum floor. He checked his watch. It was 11 p.m. The nurse had said the wait time was approximately 6 hours. 6 hours. He looked at his wife. She was shivering not from cold, but from shock. The pain in her stomach was real, but the pain in her eyes was worse. It was the realization that their safety net was gone. The platinum shield they thought protected them from the indignities of the world had been stripped away by the son they called a failure. Calvin pulled out his phone. The battery was in the red. He opened his contacts and scrolled to Darius. His thumb hovered over the call button. He wanted to scream at him. He wanted to threaten him. He wanted to beg him. But he knew it wouldn't matter. The phone would just ring and ring until it went to voicemail. Or worse, it would go straight to the operator message telling him the number had been changed. He put the phone away. He put his arm around Loretta. "I am sorry, Lo," he whispered. She didn't answer. She just closed her eyes and let the tears mix with the sweat on her face. They sat there in the noise and the fluorescent glare, 2 kings without a kingdom, waiting for their number to be called like everyone else. The darkness of the house was gone, but a different kind of darkness had settled over them. The darkness of being ordinary. The darkness of being broke. And the terrifying realization that Sunday was still 4 days away, and they had already lost everything. 7 days had passed since the Exodus, and the colonial brick house in Buckhead had transformed from a symbol of suburban triumph into a humid, suffocating cage. The air conditioning had been dead for a week. In the deep, sweltering heat of an Atlanta summer, the house was no longer a home. It was a kiln. The temperature inside hovered near 90 degrees day and night, baking the drywall and warping the hardwood floors. The smell was the first thing that hit you. It was a thick, cloying cocktail of stale sweat, spoiling garbage that couldn't be taken out because the service had been cancelled, and the lingering sulfurous odor of resentment. In the kitchen, the magnificent stainless steel refrigerator stood open like a tomb. The food inside had long since rotted. The milk had curdled, the vegetables had liquefied, and the expensive steaks meant for Trey's graduation dinner had turned gray and slimy before being tossed into the overflowing bin. Calvin Vance sat at the kitchen table, his once crisp dress shirt unbuttoned to the sternum, revealing a chest slick with perspiration. He hadn't shaved in 3 days. The gray stubble on his chin made him look older, defeated. He was staring at his phone as if it were a bomb he didn't know how to defuse. In the living room, Loretta lay on the sofa with a damp washcloth over her forehead. She wasn't humming gospel tunes anymore. She was moaning softly, a continuous low-frequency broadcast of misery. Her back pain flared in the heat, and without her premium insurance to cover the chiropractor, she was left with nothing but over-the-counter ibuprofen and her own complaints. Trey was ghosting through the house like a restless spirit. Without his car, without his high-speed internet, and without his financed iPhone, he was stripped of his personality. He sat in corners scrolling aimlessly through old photos on an old tablet that could only connect to the spotty hotspot signal Calvin managed to scrape from his limited data plan. Calvin looked at the phone again. It was time. He had waited. He had fumed. He had expected Darius to come crawling back, apologizing for the inconvenience, begging to be let back into the fold. But the driveway remained empty. The inbox remained silent. The power remained off. He wiped his sweaty palm on his trousers and picked up the phone. He punched in Darius' number with aggressive jabs of his thumb. He wasn't calling to apologize. He was calling to restore order. He was the patriarch, and it was time to remind his wayward son of the hierarchy. The phone rang, and rang, and rang. Calvin paced the kitchen floor, his shoes sticking slightly to the linoleum. "Pick up," he muttered. "Pick up, you ungrateful little—" The ringing stopped. It didn't go to a person. It went to the automated voicemail greeting. The robotic female voice was a slap in the face. Calvin didn't wait for the beep. He exploded. "Darius, answer the phone right now. Who do you think you are? You think you can just walk out of here and leave us like this? Your mother is sick, Darius. She is lying on the couch in 90-degree heat because of you. Do you hear me? You are killing her. You are killing your own mother with this petty game." He took a breath, the hot air searing his lungs. "We know what you did. We know you canceled the insurance. They took Trey's car. They embarrassed us in front of the whole neighborhood. Is that what you wanted? To shame this family, to humiliate your brother. You are jealous, Darius. You have always been jealous of him because he shines and you don't. But this is evil." He was shouting now, his voice cracking. "You turn this power back on today. Do you understand? Today. Or so help me God, I will call the police. I will tell them you stole property from this house. I will ruin you, Darius. You come back here and you fix this mess, or you are dead to me." He slammed the end call button, his chest heaving. He threw the phone onto the table. It slid across the surface, stopping just short of a pool of condensation. Did he answer? Loretta called out from the living room, her voice weak. "He is dodging me," Calvin lied, wiping his face. "He is afraid. He knows he crossed the line." An hour passed. The sun climbed higher, beating down on the roof, intensifying the oven-like conditions inside. The silence of the phone was deafening. Calvin stared at it. He willed it to ring. He imagined Darius calling back, crying, apologizing, transferring money. But the phone just sat there, black and silent. Calvin felt a cold knot of fear tighten in his stomach. The anger was burning off, leaving behind a residue of panic. What if Darius didn't care? What if the threats didn't work? What if he really wasn't coming back? He picked up the phone again. His hands were shaking, less from rage now and more from desperation. He needed a new tactic. He needed to be the bigger man. Or at least pretend to be. He dialed again. Ring, ring, ring. Voicemail. Calvin forced his voice to be calm. He adopted the tone of a benevolent king, offering a pardon to a rebellious subject. "Darius' son. Look, I know we said some things at dinner. Emotions were high. We were all stressed. Maybe I was a little harsh about the rent." He paused, wiping sweat from his upper lip. Your mother and I have talked. We are willing to make a compromise. If you come back today and get the utilities turned back on, we will waive the rent for next month. You can have a grace period. We won't charge you the $800 until September. He waited as if expecting an answer from the recording. We are a family, Darius. Families fight, but they stick together. Trey misses you. Your mother misses you? Just come home. Bring the passwords. Fix the accounts. We can put this behind us. We will even let you eat with us on Sundays. Just come home. He hung up. He looked at the phone waiting. Surely that would do it. He had offered an olive branch. He had offered amnesty. It was a generous offer. Meanwhile, 10 miles away in the heart of Midtown Atlanta, the air was crisp and cool at 72 degrees. Darius sat on the balcony of his penthouse suite on the 40th floor of the Four Seasons. The city sprawled out below him, a grid of glittering lights and moving traffic. From this height, the chaos of the world looked organized, beautiful, and silent. He held a glass of Pinot Noir in his hand, the condensation cool against his fingertips. He was wearing a silk robe that cost more than his father's monthly mortgage payment. He took a sip of the wine, letting the complex notes of cherry and earth settle on his tongue. His phone, which was resting on the glass patio table, lit up. A notification. Voicemail from Dad. 2 minutes ago. Darius didn't reach for it immediately. He watched a hawk circling the thermal currents above the skyscrapers. He felt a profound sense of detachment. It was like watching a movie of someone else's life. He picked up the phone and tapped the screen. He put it on speaker. Calvin's voice, tinny and distorted, filled the cool air of the balcony. We will waive the rent for next month. You can have a grace period. Darius listened to the whole thing. He heard the manipulation wrapped in fake generosity. He heard the desperation leaking through the cracks of the authority. He heard a man who was drowning trying to negotiate with the person on the boat. He didn't feel anger. He didn't feel sadness. He felt the dry clinical satisfaction of a scientist observing the results of an experiment. The hypothesis was confirmed. They didn't miss him. They missed his utility. They missed his wallet. He pressed the delete button. The message vanished. Then he went into his call settings. He found Calvin's contact. He scrolled down to the bottom. Block this caller. He tapped it. A confirmation box appeared. He tapped block contact. He did the same for Loretta and for Trey. Then he opened his banking app. He navigated to the transfer section. He saw the balance in his checking account. It was substantial. The money he would have spent on their electric bill, their insurance, their car payments, and their groceries for the last week was sitting there untouched. He typed in a number, $5,000. He selected a recipient. It wasn't a family member. It wasn't a friend. It was the Boys and Girls Club of Metro Atlanta, a charity that helped kids who actually needed support. Kids who didn't have golden parachutes or Mercedes-Benz dreams. He hit send. Transaction complete. Darius set the phone down face down. He picked up his wine glass and walked to the railing. He looked out at the horizon where the sun was beginning to dip, painting the sky in bruises of purple and orange. He took a deep breath, inhaling the clean, filtered air of his new life. He didn't give them a cent, not a single penny. He gave them silence, and in that silence he hoped they would finally hear the sound of their own entitlement breaking apart. Back in the sweltering house, Calvin stared at his phone. 5 minutes passed. 10, 30. He tried to call again. This time it didn't ring. It didn't go to voicemail. It just beeped once, a sharp, final tone, and then the line went dead. Call failed. He tried again. Beep. Dead. He looked at the screen, confused. Then the realization hit him. It hit him harder than the heat, harder than the hunger. He blocked me. Calvin whispered the words into the dark kitchen. He blocked me. He dropped the phone. It clattered onto the table. He put his head in his hands. For the first time in 20 years, Calvin Vance felt small. He wasn't the king of his castle anymore. He was just an old man sitting in the dark waiting for a bill he couldn't pay. From the living room, Loretta called out, her voice thin and reed-like. "Calvin, did you reach him? Is he coming?" Calvin didn't answer. He couldn't. The truth was too heavy to lift. Darius wasn't coming. And for the first time, Calvin realized that the sun he had called a shadow was the only thing that had been keeping the sun from burning them alive. The heat inside the house had become a physical weight, pressing down on the stagnant air until breathing felt like inhaling hot soup. It was noon on a Tuesday, and the temperature in the living room had climbed to 92 degrees. The silence that had plagued the house for a week was broken only by the sound of a mail truck sputtering away from the curb. Calvin Vance sat at the kitchen table, his shirt open completely, now his skin slick with sweat. He stared at the stack of envelopes he had just retrieved from the mailbox. Usually Darius brought the mail in. Usually Darius sorted it, placing the bills on Calvin's desk and shredding the junk. But Darius was gone, and the mail was piling up like unburied leaves. Calvin picked up a thick envelope with the university logo stamped in the corner. He felt a flicker of pride cut through his misery. It must be the official diploma, or perhaps a solicitation for the alumni fund. He wanted to see it. He wanted to hold the proof that at least one of his sons was a success. He needed a win. He tore open the envelope with a sweaty finger. Inside was not a parchment diploma. It was a letter printed on stark white paper with a red border. The header read, "Office of the Registrar Academic Standing Notification." Calvin squinted, reading the text. His brow furrowed. He read it again, then a third time. The words refused to make sense. "Dear Mr. Vance, this letter serves as a final notification regarding the academic status of Trey Vance. Due to failure to meet minimum grade point average requirements and an outstanding balance of $12,000 for the spring semester, Trey Vance has been placed on academic suspension. He is not eligible for graduation and has not been awarded a degree. Furthermore, please be advised that the university will be forwarding the unpaid tuition balance to collections within 30 days. Calvin felt the room spin. He dropped the letter onto the table. It landed next to a puddle of condensation from a warm glass of water. Not eligible for graduation. Unpaid balance. "Trey!" Calvin roared. The sound tore through the thick air, startling Loretta, who was dozing fitfully on the couch. Trey shuffled into the kitchen. He was wearing just his boxer shorts, holding a battery-powered fan to his face. "What, Dad?" "I am trying to sleep. It is too hot to yell." Calvin stood up. He snatched the letter from the table and shoved it into Trey's chest. "Read this." Trey looked at the paper. His eyes widened. He tried to back away, but the kitchen island blocked him. "Dad, I can explain. It is a mix-up. The system is down. I talked to the dean. Don't lie to me." Calvin whispered, his voice trembling with a rage that was terrifying in its quietness. "I gave you $20,000 in January. I wrote the check myself. I handed it to you. I told you to pay your tuition and finish your last semester strong. Where is the money, Trey?" Trey looked down at his feet. He was sweating profusely now, and it wasn't just from the heat. "I spent it." "You spent it," Calvin repeated. "On what? Books? Tutors?" "No," Trey mumbled. "Speak up." Calvin slammed his fist onto the granite countertop. "On the trip," Trey blurted out. "And the bag. Becky wanted that trip to Tulum for spring break. She said everyone was going. She said if we didn't go, we would look broke. And the bag, the Louis Vuitton. She needed it for her birthday. I thought I could make the money back, Dad. I was going to invest in crypto. I was going to pay the school before they noticed. You stole your tuition money to buy a purse." Calvin stared at his son as if he were looking at a stranger. "You didn't graduate. We threw you a party. We bought you a car. We bragged to everyone at church, and you didn't even pass your classes. I walked." Trey pleaded, tears mixing with the sweat on his face. "I walked across the stage, Dad. You saw me. You walked because you bought a cap and gown online and snuck into the line." Calvin said, the realization hitting him like a hammer. "It was all a lie. The degree. The future. You are nothing but a fraud." Loretta appeared in the doorway, clutching her robe. "Calvin." Stop. You are scaring him. He is just a boy. He made a mistake. He is 23 years old, Loretta. Calvin shouted, spinning on her. He is a criminal. He stole from us. And now we are broke, living in a sauna with a son who is a dropout, and another son who hates us. We have nothing. Just then the front door opened. The heavy wood groaned in the heat. Footsteps clicked on the hardwood floor, sharp and angry. It was Becky. She marched into the kitchen looking like a storm cloud in a designer dress. Her hair was frizzy from the humidity and her makeup was starting to run. She didn't look at Calvin or Loretta. She looked straight at Trey. "I forgot my makeup bag," she snapped. "The one I left in your bathroom last week. Give it to me. I have a date tonight and I need my setting spray." Trey looked at her, hope flaring in his eyes. "A date? Babe, what are you talking about? We are engaged." Becky laughed. It was a harsh, ugly sound. "Engaged? To who?" "To you." "Look at you, Trey. You are standing in your underwear in a dark kitchen, sweating like a pig. Your car got towed. Your phone is cut off. And I just heard your dad screaming about you failing college." She walked closer to him, wrinkling her nose. "I stood outside the door for 2 minutes, Trey. I heard everything. You didn't graduate. You used your daddy's money to buy me a bag so I wouldn't dump you. That is pathetic." Trey reached for her hand, but she recoiled. "Becky, please. It is just a setback. I have a plan. I am going to be an entrepreneur. You are going to be a loser." Becky spat. "I thought you had money, Trey. I thought you were the heir to some empire. That is what you told me. You said your brother was the black sheep and you were the prince. But it turns out your brother was the bank and you were just the charity case." She looked around the kitchen, her eyes landing on the rotting fruit in the bowl and the darkness of the appliances. "This whole family is a joke. You are all frauds. You pretend to be high class, but you can't even keep the lights on. I am done." She reached down to her left hand. She grabbed the diamond ring Trey had given her 6 months ago. He had told her it was a flawless 2-carat diamond worth $15,000. She yanked it off her finger. "And this," she said, holding the ring up to the sunlight streaming through the window. "I took this to a jeweler yesterday. I wanted to see if I could sell it to buy a new phone since you clearly couldn't buy me one. Do you know what he told me, Trey?" Trey went pale. "Becky, don't. He told me it is cubic zirconia," she screamed, throwing the ring at him. It bounced off his chest and clattered onto the floor, rolling under the fridge. "It is glass, Trey. Just like you. Fake. Cheap. And worth absolutely nothing." Calvin watched the ring fall. He looked at his son. He knew Trey didn't have money for a real ring, but hearing it said out loud, hearing the humiliation stripped bare, was agonizing. Becky grabbed her makeup bag from the counter where she must have left it days ago. "I called an Uber. A real Uber Black. Not whatever budget ride you would try to get me. I am going to find a man who can actually pay his bills. Don't call me. Don't text me. Oh, wait. You can't." She turned on her heel and stormed out. The front door slammed with a finality that shook the house. Trey stood frozen, the battery-powered fan still buzzing in his hand, blowing hot air into his face. He looked at his father. "Dad, she didn't mean it. She is just stressed." Calvin didn't answer. He walked over to the table and picked up the letter from the university. He folded it carefully. "Get dressed," Calvin said, his voice flat and dead. "What?" "Put on some clothes, Trey. You are going to go out there, and you are going to find a job. Any job. I don't care if you are flipping burgers or sweeping streets. You owe me $20,000. And you are going to pay me back every cent." "But Dad, it is hot. I can't walk in this heat." "Walk," Calvin said. "Run, crawl. I don't care." Darius walked. He walked right out of this house and he took his dignity with him. You are going to have to earn yours." Loretta started to cry softly in the corner. "Oh, Calvin, be reasonable. He is upset. He just lost his fiancée. He lost a gold digger, Loretta," Calvin snapped. "And he deserved to lose her. Just like he deserved to lose that car. We raised him to be soft. We raised him to think the world owed him a living. Well, the bill has come due. He looked at Trey, who was now sobbing quietly, his shoulders shaking. I am going to my room, Calvin said. I am going to sit in the dark, and I am going to think about how I let my good son walk away while I poured everything into a liar. Don't talk to me. Don't ask me for food. Don't ask me for money. Unless you have a paycheck in your hand, you are a ghost to me. Calvin walked out of the kitchen, leaving his wife and his golden child alone in the sweltering heat. The silence returned heavier than before, broken only by the hum of the cheap fan and the sound of Trey's world collapsing around him. He looked down at the floor, where the fake diamond ring lay gathering dust. He didn't pick it up. It belonged there, among the dirt and the debris of a life that was never really his. The living room was a mausoleum of dead air and shadows. It was late afternoon and the sun was beginning its descent, but the heat inside the house hadn't broken. If anything, it had settled deeper into the furniture and the walls, turning the heavy drapes and plush carpets into sponges for the humidity. Calvin sat on the edge of the sofa, his head in his hands. He was trying to summon the energy to get up, to find a solution, to be the man of the house again, but every idea he had hit a wall. He had called every relative he could think of. Most hadn't answered. The ones who did had offered thoughts and prayers, but no cash. He had even called his old boss, only to be reminded that his severance package was gone and his reputation was tattered. He looked over at Loretta. She was lying on the other end of the sectional, her eyes closed, her chest rising and falling in shallow, rapid breaths. She looked frail. Without her makeup, without her jewelry, without the armor of her pride, she looked like a stranger. A tired old woman who had been left behind. Calvin felt a surge of frustration, not at her, but at the situation, at the unfairness of it all. He needed to find Darius. He didn't care about apologies anymore. He just needed to find him and force him to fix this. There had to be a way. People didn't just vanish. Darius had left in an Uber. He had to be somewhere in the city. He stood up, his knees popping in the silence. He started pacing the room, looking for anything. A clue, a scrap of paper, a receipt. Darius had lived in that back room for 4 years. He must have left a trail. Calvin walked to the hallway but stopped. He didn't want to go into Darius' room again. It was too empty. It felt haunted. He turned back to the living room. He started pulling up the cushions on the sofa. Maybe a coin, maybe a lost credit card. Anything. He dug his hand into the deep crevice between the armrest and the seat. His fingers brushed against crumbs and dust bunnies. He felt something sharp, a paper clip. He kept digging. Then his fingers brushed against something stiff. It wasn't paper. It felt thicker, like cardboard or plastic. He pinched it and pulled it out. It was an envelope. It was rectangular, made of heavy cream-colored cardstock. It wasn't the cheap, thin paper of a utility bill or a credit card offer. This paper had texture. It had weight. It had been shoved deep into the crack of the sofa, probably fallen out of a pocket weeks ago and forgotten. Calvin wiped the dust off the surface. He squinted in the dim light. The return address was embossed in gold leaf. Sterling and Partners, Private Wealth Management, New York, London, Atlanta. Calvin frowned. Sterling and Partners. He knew the name. Everyone in finance knew the name. They didn't handle checking accounts. They didn't handle car loans. They handled dynasties. They handled the kind of money that didn't just sit in a bank but moved mountains. He looked at the addressee. He expected to see his own name. Maybe it was a mistake, a solicitation sent to him from before the scandal when he was still a VP. But his name wasn't there. Mr. Darius Vance. Calvin stared at the name. Darius. Why would an ultra-high net worth management firm be sending mail to Darius? It had to be a mistake, a clerical error, or maybe a scam. Yes, that was it. It was a scam targeting young men, promising them riches if they invested their savings. Darius was naive. He probably signed up for some newsletter. Calvin started to toss it onto the coffee table, but the weight of the envelope stopped him. It felt expensive. Scammers didn't use paper that felt like fabric. Scammers didn't use real gold leaf. Curiosity fought with exhaustion and won. He slid his finger under the flap. It wasn't sealed shut. It had been opened once and then stuffed away. He pulled out the contents. It was an invitation, a thick slab of black acrylic with gold lettering etched into the surface. You are cordially invited to the Meridian Gala, an evening of excellence for our diamond tier clients. Calvin felt his breath hitch. He knew the Meridian Gala. It was legendary in Atlanta. It was where the billionaires met the politicians. It was where deals were made that shaped the skyline. Tickets weren't sold. You had to be invited. And to be invited, you had to be a client. He looked at the bottom of the card. In small, discreet text, it read, "Reserved for clients with a managed portfolio exceeding $5 million. $5 million. The room seemed to tilt. Calvin sat down heavily on the coffee table, the acrylic card clutched in his sweaty hand. 5 million. It was impossible. Darius didn't have $5. He wore hoodies. He ate the chicken instead of the steak. He drove a 10-year-old Honda Civic. Loretta stirred on the couch. "What is it, Calvin? What did you find?" Calvin couldn't speak. He just held up the card. The gold lettering caught a stray beam of sunlight piercing through the drawn curtains. Loretta sat up groaning as her back protested. She squinted at the card. "What is that?" "A party invitation." "Who is it for?" "It is for Darius," Calvin whispered. "Darius?" Loretta scoffed. "Why would anyone invite him to a party? He doesn't even talk to people." Calvin handed her the card. "Read the bottom, Loretta. Read the fine print." She took it. She held it close to her face. Her lips moved as she read. "Managed portfolio. Exceeding $5 million. She went still. Her eyes widened until the whites showed all around her irises. She looked at Calvin. "Is this a joke? Did he print this out? Is it a prop for one of his games?" "It is real," Calvin said, his voice trembling. "Look at the quality, Loretta. You can't fake this. This is laser-etched acrylic. This came from Sterling and Partners." "But he is broke," Loretta said, her voice rising in pitch. "He pays $800 a month for rent. He drives a junk car. How could he have $5 million? "I don't know," Calvin said. "I don't know anything." He snatched the card back. There was something else in the envelope. A smaller paper insert. He pulled it out. It was a handwritten note on linen stationery. "Darius, we missed you at the quarterly review. Your portfolio performance has been exceptional this year. The sale of the IP was finalized last Tuesday. The $12 million has been deposited into your primary holding account as requested. Hope to see you at the gala. Best, Marcus. $12 million. The number hung in the hot air of the living room, sucking out the remaining oxygen. $12 million. Calvin felt like he had been punched in the gut. 12 million, just last Tuesday. That was the day of the dinner. The day he had thrown the rent bill at Darius. The day Darius had sat there eating chicken and drinking water while Trey ate lobster. He grabbed his phone. He didn't care about the battery life anymore. He needed to know. He opened the browser. His fingers were slippery with sweat and shaking so hard he mistyped 3 times. He finally typed it in. Darius Vance. He hit search. The little loading bar crawled across the top of the screen, agonizingly slow on the weak cellular signal. Come on, Calvin muttered. The page loaded. It wasn't a Facebook profile. It wasn't a LinkedIn page with a resume looking for work. The first result was an article from TechCrunch, dated 3 days ago. Cybersecurity prodigy Darius Vance sells encryption startup SecureX for $12 million. There was a photo. It was Darius. He wasn't wearing a hoodie. He was wearing a suit. The same suit he must have been wearing when he signed the deal. He looked serious, intelligent, and powerful. He looked like a stranger. Calvin clicked the link. He read aloud, his voice shaking. Darius Vance, known in the industry as Ghost, has been the silent architect behind some of the most robust banking security protocols used today. Working from his home office in Atlanta, Vance developed a proprietary encryption algorithm that caught the eye of defense contractors and major financial institutions. After a bidding war, Vance accepted an all-cash offer of $12 million from a Silicon Valley conglomerate, retaining full creative control of his next projects. Calvin stopped reading. He looked at Loretta. He is rich, Loretta. He is not just doing okay. He is rich. He is richer than I ever was. He is richer than anyone we know. Loretta grabbed the phone from his hand. She stared at the picture of her son, the son she had called a failure. The son she had mocked for smelling like yeast because she confused him with the girl at the bakery down the street. The son she had ignored. He lied to us. She whispered. Her voice wasn't filled with awe. It wasn't filled with pride. It was filled with a sudden sharp fury. He sat at our table and let us pay for his dinner while he had $12 million in the bank. He watched us struggle. He watched us worry about the mortgage. He watched us buy that car for Trey, and he laughed at us. She stood up. The pain in her back was forgotten. The heat was forgotten. A new energy surged through her veins, the energy of entitlement. That is family money, Calvin, she hissed. He lived under our roof while he built that. He used our electricity. He used our internet. He ate our food. That business was built on our backs. Calvin looked at her. He saw the greed lighting up her eyes. It mirrored the feeling rising in his own chest. The shame of being broke was instantly replaced by the indignation of being cheated. He owes us, Calvin said, standing up to join her. He owes us everything. We raised him. We gave him the space to work. We sacrificed for him. And this is how he repays us. By hiding his fortune. By running away. By cutting off the lights while he sits on a mountain of cash. Where is he? Loretta demanded, grabbing Calvin's arm. Where is he right now? Calvin looked at the handwritten note again, the one from Marcus. He turned it over. On the back, scribbled in blue ink, was a reminder. Please confirm address for courier. The Four Seasons Residences, Penthouse 40B. Calvin let out a short, barking laugh. The Four Seasons. Of course. He isn't at a Motel 6, Loretta. He is at the Four Seasons. He is living like a king while we rot in this oven. He showed her the address. Loretta stared at it like a wolf staring at a lamb. Penthouse. She breathed. She looked down at her silk robe stained with sweat. She looked around the dark, sweltering living room. Then she looked at Calvin. Get the keys, she said. We don't have a car, Calvin reminded her. Trey's car is gone. My Lexus is out of gas and I don't have money to fill it. Loretta didn't blink. She walked to the mantel where a jar of emergency cash had sat for years. It usually held pennies and loose change. She dumped it out. She counted the quarters, the dimes, the crumpled dollar bills. $17. It is enough for an Uber, she said. But how will we get back? Calvin asked. We aren't coming back. Loretta said, her eyes gleaming with a terrifying certainty. We are going to the penthouse, Calvin. We are going to see our son. And we are not leaving until he gives us what is ours. He thinks he can cut us off. He thinks he can leave a note on the fridge and walk away with $12 million. She laughed, a dry, humorless sound. He forgot who raised him. He forgot that I am his mother, and a mother always gets her due. Calvin nodded. He felt a rush of adrenaline. They had a mission now. They had a target. The despair of the last week evaporated, replaced by the thrill of the hunt. They weren't helpless victims anymore. They were creditors coming to collect. Call the Uber, Calvin said. They moved with sudden, frantic purpose. Loretta went to the bedroom to change into her best dress, even though it was wrinkled. She put on her jewelry, the fake pearls and the gold-plated watch. She needed to look the part. She needed to look like the mother of a millionaire. Calvin put on his suit jacket over his sweaty shirt. He didn't care about the smell. He cared about the image. They walked out of the hot, dark house and stood on the curb waiting for the car that would take them to their salvation. They didn't think about the apology they owed him. They didn't think about the cruelty of the dinner. They didn't think about the years of neglect. They only thought about the number. 12 million. And as the Uber pulled up a battered Toyota Camry that was a far cry from the limousines they felt they deserved, they climbed in with their heads held high. They were on their way to claim their inheritance. They were on their way to the Four Seasons. And they had no idea that they were walking straight into the lion's den. The automatic doors of the Four Seasons residences slid open with a hushed whisper, revealing a lobby that smelled of white tea and expensive lilies. It was a scent that screamed money, old quiet money. Into this sanctuary of cool air and polished marble stepped the Vance family. They looked like refugees from a natural disaster. Calvin was sweating through his suit jacket, his shirt clinging to his chest. Loretta hobbled in her heels, her makeup settling into the lines of her face. Trey trailed behind them, looking sullen and defeated in his wrinkled shorts and t-shirt. They stood out against the cream-colored walls like a stain. The concierge, a man with posture so straight he looked like he was carved from stone, looked up from his desk. He didn't frown. He didn't sneer. He simply raised an eyebrow a fraction of an inch, which was the customer service equivalent of a scream. "Can I help you?" the concierge asked, his voice smooth and neutral. Calvin marched up to the desk. He tried to summon the bluster that had served him for 20 years in middle management. "I am here to see my son, Darius Vance. Penthouse 40B. Tell him his family is here." The concierge typed something into his terminal. "I see. Do you have an appointment, Mr. Vance?" "Appointment," Calvin scoffed. "I am his father. I don't need an appointment to see my own blood. Call him. Tell him to get down here or we are coming up." The concierge picked up a phone. He spoke quietly into the receiver, his eyes never leaving Calvin's sweaty face. He waited. He nodded once. He hung up. "Mr. Vance says you may ascend," the concierge said. He gestured toward a bank of elevators set apart from the others. "The private elevators. Use the panel on the right. It has been unlocked for you." Calvin smirked at Loretta. "See, he knows. He knows he is in trouble." They walked to the elevator. The doors opened, revealing an interior lined with mirrors and gold trim. They stepped inside. The ride up was silent and incredibly fast. Their ears popped as they shot past the 10th floor, then the 20th, then the 30th. Loretta used the mirrors to try and fix her hair, but the humidity had done its damage. She looked wild, desperate. She stopped trying and instead practiced her wounded expression. She needed to look pitiful. She needed to look like a mother who had been wronged. The elevator slowed. The doors opened directly into the apartment. There was no hallway, no foyer, just space. The penthouse was a cavern of glass and light. The entire far wall was a window looking out over the Atlanta skyline. The city lay spread out below them, glittering and vast. The floors were polished concrete, softened by rugs that looked like abstract paintings. The furniture was low, sleek, and Italian. In the corner, a glass staircase spiraled up to a second level. It was breathtaking. It was intimidating. It smelled of nothing but clean, filtered air and ozone. And there, standing by the window, was Darius. He wasn't wearing a hoodie. He was wearing a charcoal gray suit perfectly tailored. He held a crystal tumbler in his hand filled with an amber liquid. He didn't turn around when the elevator chimed. He just kept looking out at the city. Calvin stepped into the room. His shoes clicked loudly on the floor. He felt a sudden wave of vertigo. This place was too big, too rich. It made his colonial house in the suburbs look like a dollhouse. Darius Calvin boomed, trying to fill the space with his voice. Darius turned slowly. His face was a mask of calm. He took a sip of his drink. The ice clinked against the glass. "Hello, Dad. Hello, Mom. Trey." Calvin marched across the room. He stopped 10 feet away from Darius. He wanted to get closer to loom over him, but something in Darius' posture stopped him. A barrier of cold indifference. "Look at this," Calvin said, sweeping his arm around the room. "Look at how you are living. You are up here drinking whiskey in a palace while your mother is sleeping in a house that feels like an oven. Do you have any idea what we have been through this week?" Darius swirled his drink. "I have a general idea. I assume the power was cut on Tuesday." You assumed, Loretta shrieked, stepping forward. You knew. You did it. You tried to kill us, Darius. I had a medical emergency. I went to the hospital and they turned me away because you canceled the insurance. I had to go to Grady Darius. I sat on a plastic chair for 6 hours in pain. I'm sorry to hear that, Darius said. His tone was polite but entirely lacking in empathy. It sounded like a customer service recording. If you had paid the premiums yourself like most adults, that wouldn't have happened. Don't you lecture me about being an adult, Calvin shouted. He felt his authority slipping away, swallowed up by the luxury of the room. He needed to reassert himself. He needed to be the father. You are a selfish, arrogant boy. You think because you stumbled into some money, you are better than us. You are not. You are still my son, and you have a responsibility. Responsibility, Darius repeated, testing the word. Yes, responsibility. We raised you. We fed you. We put a roof over your head. And now that you have made it, you think you can just discard us. You leave us to rot while you live like a king. It is a sin, Darius. It is a sin against God and against your family. You have money. Calvin continued, his eyes scanning the room hungrily, taking in the art on the walls, the sculptures, the sheer expensive emptiness of it all. You have millions. We saw the article, $12 million, and you begrudge us $800 for rent. You begrudge your brother a car. You are sick. Darius walked over to the long dining table. It was a slab of black marble. He set his drink down on a coaster. I didn't begrudge you rent, Dad. I paid it. I paid it for 4 years. I paid the rent. I paid the lights. I paid the internet. I paid for the food in the fridge. I paid for the clothes on your backs. You paid what you owed. Calvin spat. That was your contribution. But now you have hit the jackpot. And you are hoarding it. We are drowning, Darius. We are about to lose the house. We have nothing. And you are standing there in a $3,000 suit watching us sink. You have a moral obligation to share this. This is family money. Loretta saw her opening. She let out a sob, a wet, ragged sound. She collapsed onto one of the leather sofas, burying her face in her hands. My baby, she wailed. My own son. I carried you for 9 months. I nursed you. I loved you when you were nothing. And now look at you. You are so cold. How can you be so cruel? I am sick, Darius. The stress is killing me. My heart can't take it. She looked up at him, tears streaming down her face, ruining her powder. I need help, baby. We all do. We just want to be a family again. We want you to come home. Or at least, help us save our home. We are desperate. She reached out a hand toward him, trembling theatrically. Please, Darius, don't let your mother suffer. Don't let your father lose his dignity. We are sorry if we were harsh. We just want what is best for you. And right now what is best is for you to do the right thing. Darius looked at her hand. He didn't move to take it. He looked at Trey, who had been silent until now, standing by the elevator, looking at a sculpture that probably cost more than his college tuition. Trey turned his eyes wide with greed. He saw the weakness in his parents' approach. They were begging. Trey didn't beg. Trey charmed. He walked over to Darius, putting on his best smile, the one that usually got him out of trouble. Bro, he said, his voice smooth. Ignore them. They are old school. They don't get it. He gestured around the penthouse. This place is insane, man. Seriously, you are the ghost, right? That is what the article said. That is legendary. I always knew you were a genius. I told everyone. My brother is the smartest guy I know. He laughed a nervous chuckle. Look, I know things got messed up. The car, the rent, whatever. It is water under the bridge. But listen, I am in a bind. A real bind. Becky left me, man. She walked out because I didn't have the cash to keep up. He moved closer, leaning in conspiratorially, as if they were partners. I have a plan, Darius. A real business plan. Not that college stuff. I want to launch a lifestyle brand. Influencer marketing. I have the followers. I just need the seed capital. I need a runway. He looked at Darius, his eyes gleaming. 50,000. That is all I need. 50 grand to get the site up, get some inventory, maybe lease a workspace. It is nothing to you, man. You have 12 million. 50,000 is like pocket change. You help me out. I get on my feet and I pay you back with interest. Plus, we are brothers. Brothers look out for each other, right? Darius looked at Trey. He looked at the brother who had mocked him for years. The brother who had stolen his tuition money to buy a purse. The brother who had accepted a car he didn't earn while Darius was handed a bill. 50,000, Darius said, his voice flat. Yeah, man, Trey said, nodding eagerly. Just to get started, I will put you on the board. We can be partners. Vance Brothers. Think about the brand potential. Darius looked back at Calvin, who was nodding in agreement, as if this request was perfectly reasonable. He looked at Loretta, who had stopped crying to listen, her eyes sharp and calculating. They didn't see him. Even now, standing in his palace of success, they didn't see him. They saw an ATM. They saw a resource to be mined. They thought because he had money he had forgotten who they were. They thought he was weak. Darius walked over to the marble table. There was a thin leather folder sitting there. He picked it up. You talk about responsibility, Dad, Darius said. You talk about family, Mom. And you, Trey, you talk about partnership. He tapped the folder against the stone surface. The sound echoed in the quiet room. You are right. I do have a responsibility. I have a responsibility to my assets. I have a responsibility to my investments. And I have a responsibility to the truth. He opened the folder. You came here asking for money. You came here asking for help. But you didn't come to ask Darius, your son, or your brother. You came to ask Darius the millionaire. He pulled out a stack of documents. They were stapled together, thick and official. Well, Darius the millionaire is a businessman. And business is about leverage. It is about contracts. And it is about debts. He slid the papers across the long table toward them. They slid smoothly over the polished marble, stopping right in front of Calvin. What is this? Calvin asked, staring at the documents. Darius smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of a predator who had just sprung a trap. That, Dad, is the answer to your prayers. You said you were about to lose the house. You said the bank was calling. Calvin nodded slowly, reaching for the papers. Well, Darius said, you don't have to worry about the bank anymore. I took care of it. Loretta's face lit up. Oh, thank you, Jesus. I knew it. I knew you had a good heart. You paid it off. You paid off the mortgage. Darius shook his head slightly. No, Mom, I didn't pay it off. I bought it. He watched the confusion ripple across their faces. The bank was selling your distressed debt. It is a common practice for high-risk loans that are in default. My wealth management team identified it as a potential acquisition, so I bought the note. He leaned forward, planting his hands on the table. I own your mortgage now. I am the bank. And according to these papers, which outlines the terms of your default, I have the right to foreclose on the property immediately. The silence in the room was absolute. Even the hum of the city below seemed to vanish. You are my tenants now, Darius said softly. And rent is due. The silence in the penthouse was heavy and absolute, broken only by the hum of the city 40 stories below. Calvin Vance stared at the documents spread across the black marble table. His hands, usually so steady when he was commanding his household, were trembling violently. He picked up the top sheet. It was a legal notice, the kind printed on thick, intimidating paper. At the top in bold letters it read, Assignment of Mortgage and Transfer of Liane. He read the words, but his brain refused to process them. It was like trying to read a foreign language. He saw his name. He saw Loretta's name. He saw the address of the house in Buckhead. And then he saw the name of the new lien holder, not a bank, not a mortgage company. Vance Asset Management, LLC. He looked up at Darius. His son was standing on the other side of the table, his hands resting lightly on the cool stone surface. Darius didn't look triumphant. He didn't look angry. He looked like a man reviewing a spreadsheet. He looked bored. What does this mean? Calvin whispered. His voice was a dry rasp. What did you do? Darius tapped the paper with his index finger. It means that yesterday morning at 9 a.m., I wired $412,000 to the regional bank that held your mortgage. I purchased the note. I purchased the debt. Effectively, Dad, I am the bank. Loretta let out a gasp. She reached for the papers, her eyes scanning them frantically. But we pay the mortgage, she stammered. We pay it every month. It's on autopay. You set it up. I set up the primary mortgage, Darius said calmly. The one from 20 years ago, the one with the low interest rate. And yes, that one is paid. He paused, letting the silence stretch out, letting the tension build until it was suffocating. I'm talking about the second mortgage, Darius said. The home equity line of credit you took out 6 months ago. The one with the predatory variable interest rate. The one you used to put the down payment on the Mercedes. The one you used to pay for the party at Chops. The one you used to buy that suit you're wearing. Calvin squeezed his eyes shut. He felt exposed. He thought that was a secret. He thought he had hidden it. He had told Loretta it was a bonus from work. He had told Trey it was just liquid assets. He hadn't told anyone that he had leveraged the only asset they had left, the roof over their heads, to fund the illusion of their success. You haven't made a payment on that line of credit in 90 days, Darius continued, his voice devoid of judgment, just stating facts. You maxed it out, burned through $80,000 in 6 months, and then ghosted the bank. They classified the loan as non-performing last week. They were preparing to initiate foreclosure proceedings on Monday. Foreclosure, Loretta breathed. The word hung in the air like a guillotine blade. We were going to lose the house. Yes, Darius said. You were going to lose the house. The bank doesn't care about your bridge club, Mom. They don't care about your reputation. They care about their money. They were going to auction it off on the courthouse steps to the highest bidder. He walked around the table, moving closer to them. He didn't invade their space, but his presence was overwhelming. He smelled of expensive cologne and power. But they didn't, Darius said. Because I stepped in. My team flagged the distressed asset. I saw the address. I saw the names. And I decided to make an investment. Calvin looked up, a flicker of hope igniting in his eyes. He grasped at it desperately. You saved us, he said, his voice trembling with relief. You bought the debt to save us. Oh, thank God. Thank God. Darius, son, I knew you wouldn't let us fall. I knew you still cared. Loretta started crying again, this time tears of salvation. My baby, she sobbed. You paid it off. You cleared the debt. We're safe. Darius watched them. He watched the relief wash over their faces. He watched them rewrite the narrative in real time, turning him back into the dutiful son, the safety net, the invisible infrastructure that kept them comfortable. He waited until they had let out their breath. He waited until the smiles started to form on their faces. Then he crushed them. I didn't pay it off, Darius said. The smiles faltered. I bought the debt, he repeated, articulating every syllable. I didn't erase it. I acquired it. The debt still exists. The lien still exists. The default still exists. The only difference is that you don't owe the bank anymore. You owe me. Calvin froze. What? I am your creditor, Darius said. And as of this morning, I have accelerated the loan. I have called the note due. You owe me $82,000 immediately, or I exercise my right as the lien holder to foreclose on the property and evict the occupants. Evict, Calvin choked out. You would evict your own parents. You would put us on the street. You tried to put me on the street on Tuesday, Darius said. You handed me a bill for $800 and told me to get out if I couldn't pay. You told me I was taking up space. You told me I was a liability. He leaned against the table, crossing his arms. I'm just applying your logic, Dad. This is business. You said Trey was an investment and I was a drain. Well, now I'm the investor, and I'm looking at my portfolio and I see a house occupied by 3 unemployed adults who haven't paid their bills in months. That looks like a bad asset to me. But we're family, Loretta screamed. You can't treat family like a business transaction. You did. Darius shot back, his voice finally rising just a fraction, just enough to show the steel underneath the silk suit. You monetized my existence for years. You took my money and treated me like a servant. You sat there eating steak while I ate chicken because I didn't contribute. You made it transactional. I'm just closing the deal. He pointed to the second stack of papers on the table. However, Darius said, his voice dropping back to that terrifying calm, I am not unreasonable. I don't want the house. It's old. It's poorly maintained. The wiring is a mess. I should know. I fixed it enough times. I have no interest in living there. I have this. He gestured to the penthouse walls. So, he continued, I am willing to offer you a forbearance agreement. A deal. You can stay in the house. I won't foreclose. I won't kick you out. Calvin slumped, exhaling. Okay. What are the terms? We can pay you back over time. Once I get a job. No, Darius interrupted. I don't trust your ability to get a job, Calvin. Your resume is radioactive, and Mom hasn't worked since 1998. I don't want promises. I want cash flow. He tapped the document. We are converting your occupancy into a rental agreement. Effective immediately, the house is a rental property owned by Vance Asset Management. You are the tenants. Tenants in our own home, Loretta whispered, horrified. And the rent, Darius said, ignoring her, is $2,500 a month. That is the fair market value for a 4-bedroom home in Buckhead. Actually, it's a discount. I'm being generous. 2,500, Calvin shouted. Are you insane? We have $17. Darius? 17. How are we supposed to pay that? We can't. You know we can't. I know you can't, Darius said. He looked at Calvin, then he looked at Loretta. And finally, his gaze slid over to the corner of the room where Trey was trying to make himself invisible against the glass wall. Darius smiled, but he can. All eyes turned to Trey, the golden child, the future of the legacy. He looked like a deer caught in the headlights of a semi-truck. He was sweating in his wrinkled t-shirt, clutching his phone like a lifeline that had been cut. Me, Trey squeaked. Bro, I don't have any money, you know that. Becky took the ring. The car is gone. I have nothing. You have a degree, don't you? Darius asked, his voice dripping with faux innocence. Dad said you graduated. He said you were the first of your generation to step up. He said you had ambition. He said you were worth it. Darius walked over to Trey. He stood toe-to-toe with him. Trey shrank back. If you are worth a $60,000 car, Trey, surely you are worth a $2,500 rent check. You are an adult now. Isn't that what Dad said? It's time you launched? He turned back to his parents. Here is the deal. The lease is in Trey's name. He is the guarantor. He is responsible for the rent. If the rent is paid on the first of the month, every month you all get to stay. You get to keep your house. You get to keep your appearances. You get to pretend you aren't destitute. But if the rent is late, Darius said, his eyes locking onto Trey's. Even by 1 day I foreclose. I evict. And I put you all on the curb with nothing but the clothes on your backs, and I will live stream it. He can't pay that, Loretta wailed. He doesn't have a job. Then he better get one, Darius said. Today. He walked back to the table and picked up the last document. He held it out to Trey. It was a rental application. There are plenty of jobs, Trey. I saw a help wanted sign at the car wash on Piedmont. They're hiring detailers, minimum wage plus tips. If you work 60 hours a week, you might just make rent. Trey looked at his father. Dad, tell him. I can't work at a car wash. I have a business degree. Calvin looked at his son. He looked at the boy he had spoiled, the boy he had put on a pedestal, the boy he had chosen over the son who was currently holding the deed to their lives. He saw the weakness in Trey's face. He saw the entitlement. And he saw the trap Darius had set. It was perfect. It was cruel. And it was inescapable. Sign the paper, Trey, Calvin said, his voice broken. Dad, sign the paper. Calvin roared, the veins in his neck bulging. Do you want your mother to sleep on the street? Sign the damn lease? Trey walked to the table. His hands were shaking so hard he could barely hold the pen Darius offered him. He looked at the document. Tenant Trey Vance. Monthly rent, $2,500. Due date first of the month. It was the same format as the bill Calvin had given Darius. The same font. The same layout. But the number was bigger. And the consequences were real. Trey signed. The ink looked black and permanent against the white paper. Darius took the document back. He checked the signature. He nodded. "Welcome to the real world, little brother," Darius said. "Rent is due on Sunday." "But that's in 3 days," Trey whispered. "Better start scrubbing," Darius said. "I hear the tips are good if you smile." He looked at his watch. "Now get out of my house. I have a dinner reservation, and I'm ordering the steak." The ink on the lease agreement was still wet when I reached into my jacket pocket for the final document. The room was silent save for the heavy breathing of 3 people who had just realized their lives were no longer their own. Trey looked like he might vomit. His hand was cramping from the signature that had just signed away his freedom. Calvin and Loretta were staring at the floor, unable to look at the luxury that surrounded them, without feeling the sting of their own poverty. "Wait," I said, my voice cutting through the quiet like a razor. "There is one more thing." Trey looked up, his eyes red-rimmed and terrified. "What? What else do you want?" I signed the paper. "I am going to get a job." I walked over to him. I held up a single sheet of paper. It was a credit card statement. A platinum Visa statement. "I noticed a charge on my credit report last month," I said, keeping my tone conversational. "A credit card opened in my name, but the billing address was the house in Buckhead. And the charges were interesting. Flights to Tulum, a designer handbag store, bottle service at a club in Miami." Trey's face lost the last of its color. He looked like a ghost. "I didn't open this card, Trey. You did. You used my social security number. You forged my electronic signature. That is identity theft. That is wire fraud. That is a federal felony." Loretta gasped, covering her mouth. "No, he wouldn't." "He did," I said, looking at my mother. "And I have the IP logs to prove the application came from his computer." I leaned in close to Trey. I could smell the fear on him. It smelled like sweat and cheap cologne. "Here is the choice, little brother. You can walk out of here and go straight to the police station and turn yourself in. You will probably get 3 to 5 years in federal prison. Or you can honor that lease you just signed." I pointed at the document on the table. "You get that job at the car wash. You work every shift they give you. You scrub the rims, you vacuum the carpets. You smile at the customers who drive the cars you used to think you deserved. And you bring me $2,500 on the first of every month. Not a day late, not a dollar short. If you miss a payment, if you complain, if you try to quit. I file the police report. I send you to jail. And then I evict Mom and Dad. Do you understand the terms?" Trey nodded. He couldn't speak. He was shaking so hard his teeth were chattering. "Good," I said. "Now get out of my sight." They left the penthouse like a funeral procession. There was no bluster left in Calvin, no indignation left in Loretta, no swagger left in Trey. They walked to the elevator, their heads bowed, their shoulders slumped under the weight of the reality I had just dropped on them. The doors slid shut, cutting off their view of the skyline, cutting off their view of me. I stood there for a moment in the silence. I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel sad. I felt balanced. The scales had been corrected. The debt had been paid. The next few months played out exactly as I had orchestrated. I didn't need to be there to see it. I had my property manager handle the collections. But I heard the stories. Trey got the job at the car wash on Piedmont. The manager hired him on the spot because he looked desperate. It was hard work, brutal work in the Georgia heat. Trey spent his days on his knees scrubbing brake dust off of wheels, getting soaked with soapy water, sweating through his uniform. One afternoon, Becky drove through. She was in the passenger seat of a new BMW driven by a guy who looked like he played linebacker for UGA. She saw Trey wiping down the hood. She didn't say hello. She just lowered her sunglasses, looked at him for a long second, and then rolled the window up. Trey didn't look up. He just kept scrubbing. He had rent to pay. Back at the house, the dynamic had shifted permanently. Calvin and Loretta lived in a state of perpetual anxiety. The house was no longer their castle. It was their cage. Every time the phone rang, they jumped. Every time the mail came, they held their breath. They knew I was watching. They knew I held the deed. They stopped going to the country club. They stopped hosting dinners. They lived quiet, small lives, terrified of stepping out of line, terrified that Trey would slip up and bring the walls crashing down. They had their house, but they had lost their home. As for me, I didn't stick around to watch the show. 2 days after the meeting, I packed a single carry-on bag. I walked out of the penthouse and got into a waiting car. The drive to Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport was smooth. I watched the city pass by one last time. I felt no attachment to it anymore. It was just a place where I used to live. I walked through the terminal, bypassing the long security lines with my status. I went to the international lounge. I ordered a glass of champagne. I pulled out my phone. I opened the family group chat one last time. It had been silent since the night I left. No one dared to post. I typed a single message: "The bill is paid. You are welcome." Then I hit send. I left the group. I blocked the numbers. I deleted the contacts. I boarded the plane, first class, destination Tokyo. I had always wanted to see the cherry blossoms. I had always wanted to eat sushi at Jiro. I had always wanted to disappear. As the plane lifted off the tarmac, the engines roaring with power, I looked down at Atlanta shrinking below me. The house in Buckhead was just a speck. The car wash was just a speck. The pain, the humiliation, the years of being the forgotten son, it all grew smaller and smaller until it was gone. I reclined my seat. I closed my eyes. I wasn't Darius the shadow anymore. I wasn't Darius the bank. I was just Darius. And for the first time in 26 years, I owed absolutely nothing to anyone. The ledger was closed, the account was settled, and I was finally free. This story serves as a stark reminder that family is defined by behavior, not just blood. Darius spent years trying to buy affection only to realize he was financing his own disrespect. The ultimate lesson here is that you cannot save people who are determined to drown you to stay afloat. True empowerment begins the moment you stop negotiating your worth with those who cannot afford it. Setting boundaries is not an act of malice. It is a necessary act of survival. Sometimes walking away isn't about giving up on family. It is about finally choosing to bet on yourself. Have you ever had to cut off a toxic relationship to save your future? Tell us your story in the comments below, and hit subscribe for more tales of justice and redemption.